Okay. Well, for the remaining time that we have a microphone that works, we get to discuss a lifetime worth of developing intimacy. Sounds like we can probably pull that off today, right? I mean, shoot for the moon. I should know better, because if you've been attending my class on Sunday morning, when I intend to cover an entire topic, it doesn't seem to work out. But we're going to make it happen. And it's worth a little bit of a recap, because last week we had his instrument here, and we've had a little bit of time to stew on it. So the Song of Songs begins with a boy and a girl. You remember, they're infatuated with one another. They're singing their praises. They're distracted by work. They just want to spend time together. And they're constantly told by the young women of Jerusalem, don't awaken love until the time is right. You remember? But the time finally does become right. That was that second message. Man stands before woman at the altar of marriage. Remember how he felt? He's right across from her, and he says, I feel like you're like an entire country away from you, because I know this moment is important, but all I want to do is get behind the veil. Intimacy still felt a little bit distant, but ultimately, they get there. And the women of Jerusalem pop up, which they've done many times. Slow down, don't awaken love, catch all the foxes. You remember their response, though? After the marriage ceremony has taken place and they're finally allowed for love to burst onto the scene, they say, this is exactly the way it's supposed to be. The girls who've been saying, like, don't let this happen, instead say, go for it. And the young woman says, chapter 4, verse 16, awake, north wind, rise up, south wind, blow on my garden, spread its fragrance around, come into my garden, my love, taste its finest fruits. We noted invitation extended and invitation accepted, right? Chapter 5, verse 1a, I have entered my garden, my treasure, my bride. I gather myrrh with my spices, honeycomb with my honey, drink wine with my milk. And we noted, critically, the change of possession. It's no longer her garden, kept secret. It's his. It's a shared garden. It's Paul's expectation in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, where the husband's body is the wife's, and the wife's body is the husband, and it's this giving and taking. It's two becoming one. The pesky women of Jerusalem show up, and you think they're going to throw cold water on the whole thing. But instead they say, O lover and beloved. Chapter 5, verse B, or chapter 5, 1, verse B. Eat and drink deeply of your love. And we noted that's a mistranslation. Remember what it actually said? Get drunk on love. This is right and good and holy. Get lost in each other. Figure out ways, be creative to be intimate, not just physically, but in every other dimension of being. Find ways to get lost in your spouse. I hope you've had some time over the past couple weeks to talk about what that might look like in your marriage. And if you've forgotten or put it off, I'm telling you to have it again. Now, I think everyone wishes their marital intimacy through the entirety of their life looked like chapter 4, verse 1 through 5, verse 1. Right? Where it's just this articulation of love. You're so beautiful. You're amazing. I can't wait to be alone with you. You're great. You complete me. I'd never look anywhere else, right? We all wish, man, I got to move. There's a glare off a vehicle out there that's just brutal. Plus, now I get a new angle to stare you down. Here's what I know. Marriage doesn't oftentimes feel like that. Oh, dear. Close the door. Thanks. Man, coming to my aid. Beautiful. That's hilarious. That's never happened before in 6 years. I'm just going to stay over here, okay? Feels fresh. We all wish our marriage was full of the lovey-dovey all the time. The reality is it's not like that all the time, is it? There gets to be challenging things, hard seasons. We don't know how to talk with each other. We don't know how to be intimate emotionally, spiritually, and physically. But I'm here to tell you today that you can learn to do better by God's grace. And I call this by earning your green thumb. I got a little picture. If I throw the picture up on the screen, what does that make you think of? A gardener, yeah, right? So the proverbial green thumb is somebody who can make things grow. And if you put them in our house, our cat eats them and they die. There's a master gardener. I read this little article earlier this week to describe how you go about earning your green thumb. And here's the quote from the article. It says, "A green thumb gardener is simply someone who has grown a lot of plants, killed quite a few along the way, but doesn't mention those failures and keeps on gardening." And then she lists a number of steps for how you and I, if you ever have any desire to garden, could garden. But by the way, I'm using garden metaphorically, if you haven't noticed through the entire series. So think beyond physical gardening for this list of steps. Pick your plants. What do you want to see grow? What does that look like in your relationship right now? What are the things that you want to focus on to make sure that that part of your life and intimacy produces fruit? And then gear up. Get whatever is necessary to help. As a gardener, you might need a little spade and some gloves and some soil. In other ways, let your imagination wander. Whatever you need to gear up. Pick the right spot. This is about timing, intentionality, and knowledge of one another. Pump up the dirt. Did you know that most plants don't want to grow in your cracked, dry dirt that has no moisture and no nutrients in your backyard? You need to figure out how to add things in. She says, most of us don't have ideal soil, but we can fix that. How do we do it? Fertilize. Find exterior things to throw in to be able to add nutrients, new exposure to produce new fruit and new growth. And then, this step, I mean in all the ways. Get dirty. Get after it. You don't learn and grow simply through knowledge and reading books. You actually have to put in the effort to learn to gardening and get your green thumb. And then, this one's 3 steps in one. Weed, weed, weed. Pull out the weeds, keep looking for weeds, and till up the area where weeds might develop. And then finally, your last step in earning your green thumb is harvest the happiness from the hard work and the dedication. Just like gardening plants, intimacy in your life will not produce the fruit that you hope unless you carefully tend it and pay attention. Luckily, God has lots of grace for our inadequacies, and we're told to extend those same graces to our partners in life as we're pursuing intimacy. You're designed, I want you to know this, to pursue and be pursued. It's inherent to your being. Not just like physically with your spouse, but with God. You are designed to pursue Him and to be pursued by Him. You're designed to pursue your spouse and be pursued by your spouse, and pursue your kids and be pursued by your kids, and pursue friendships and be pursued by friendships. Your desire is to know and be fully known, and that's not a stagnant state. It's a process of becoming and learning and growing, and it's always in flux. True spiritual life and human relationships are meant to be intimate ones. But as human beings, we constantly mess this up. We've seen this time and time again. At the beginning of the relationship in the Song of Songs, there's a daydream. Do you remember? The girl and the guy are skipping work, and they're laying under a tree in the grass. And she says this, "You're handsome, my love, pleasing beyond words. The soft grass is our bed." This is on the screen. "Fragrant cedar branches are the beams of our house, and pleasant-smelling firs are the rafters." What are they doing? They're daydreaming of building a home together. Don't we all just wish we're stuck in the daydreaming stage? The dream state of before becomes, in their case, unfortunately, a nightmare. And it's a nightmare that I feel like all of us, in some way, shape, or form, have participated in. And maybe, just maybe, they're going to give us a spiritual pathway out. Today, the dream state turns into a moment where the honeymoon stage is gone, and for some reason, one or both of the partners is not doing the pursuing the way that they're supposed to. And it creates all sorts of mayhem in the relationship. It's worth noting, by the way, that this moment is not chapters later. Chapter 1, verse 5, we just read. I'm into my garden, my love. And the women are like, yes, get drunk on love. And you think, well, that's going to carry them through for a while, right? Chapter 5, verse 2 begins the nightmare. What does that mean for you? I don't necessarily think, by the way, this means it happened the next day. That's not what's going on. And it's a dream. Everything is supposed to be taken metaphorical. But I think the proximate location should give us pause that if we're not willing to pursue beyond the honeymoon stage, we're going to find ourselves in trouble. Here's what happens. Chapter 5, verse 2. I slept, but my heart was awake when I heard my lover knocking and calling. Open to me, my treasure, my darling, my dove, my perfect one. My head is drenched with dew, my hair with the dampness of night. What's going on here? This is a man desiring intimacy with his spouse, and he's going out on a limb. Here, the limb is clearly sexual intimacy, but I want you to think above and beyond that as well. There's lots of things layered into this poetry and this dream inside of poetry. How is the invitation going to be received? Previously well, this time not so great. Verse 3, I responded, I've taken off my robe. Should I get dressed again? I've washed my feet. Should I get them soiled? What's happening? He got shut down. That advance was not received. You could read this as I'm tired, I'm put out. You can't really expect me to get interested and get up and going again. We've all been there. On both sides of the gender gap, by the way. And I want to be careful here, because I don't think what happens in the rest of this text is because of this moment. It'd be silly to read it like that. It's a dream state. We're supposed to imagine kind of the perfection of this, not just one ask in denial for this specific thing, but the pursuit of the other, and it perpetually being stunted. Like the wife trying to get the husband to emotionally open up and trying time and time and time again until they finally stop trying. The husband or the woman asking for intimacy and physically in a different way, time after time after time and it not landing. A husband asking to be considered above the kids time and time and time again, and it not happening. This is not meant to be a one-moment thing. Ladies and guys in the room, don't put yourself in the shoes of this for one moment or one event. This is meant to be a timefulness, a perfection, an end to this pattern of behavior. Don't feel the pressure every moment. That's silly. Especially because this understanding of a shared garden and intimacy, what does that mean? It doesn't just mean that both parties get to go and rob the fruit whenever they want. The garden will quickly die. A shared garden isn't simply about enjoying the fruits, it's about putting in the effort together. What do you need as a good gardener? Sometimes you need to let the plants rest. They need some sun. They need some water. Sometimes, though, when you're tired and put out, you still need to get up and pull some weeds. Or that time next week, the garden's going to be choked out and you're not going to get the cucumbers you want. Shared garden is more than just shared. It's not exploitation. It's shared responsibility. Responsibility leads to health in the garden. That's a bit of a sidetrack. The man doesn't walk away defeated in the moment, which I think is interesting in the text. Verse 4. My lover, this is the woman talking, tried to unlatch the door after she said no. Jiggle in the handle, doesn't have the right key. And listen to the change of tone. My heart thrilled within me. I jumped up to open the door for my love, my hands dripping with perfume, my fingers dripped with lovely myrrh as I pulled back the bolt. What happened here? The continued pursuit past the original uncomfortable experience awakened something in her. Guys, that's a lesson. It's a lesson for both sexes in the relationship in a variety of ways, but if you don't keep pursuing and your spouse doesn't feel pursued rather than used, things might not go well. But if you're willing to go the extra mile and invest in the garden, you might be able to harvest some of the intimacy you want. When your spouse feels like a treasure that you're trying to pursue and protect, rather than like a tree that you're trying to steal all the possible fruit and energy from, things can probably go a little bit better. So, gentlemen, put in a little bit extra effort. Some gifts, some time together, some acts of service, more affirming words, whatever it works with in your marriage. It'll be better than just knocking on the door. Figure out the way to jiggle the handle in your marriage. At this point, though, the dream flips from exciting and suspenseful to chaotic and scary. This is where it becomes a nightmare. And again, it's not from the one moment, but this is the conclusion of probably multiple moments and patterns of behavior. Here we go. Chapter 5, verse 6. I opened the door, and he was gone. My heart sank. I searched for him, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I called for him, but there was no reply. This is not just a couple flying off the handle because of one intense moment or series of events or even a few weeks or a few months. This is when the dream of intimacy turns into a nightmare of loneliness. I don't imagine the desire for intimacy or the struggle to find it is just that quick jiggle of the handle. Instead, imagine weeks and months and years of your spouse trying to get to know you better and you withholding in whatever way that meant. It could be a husband who, rather than coming home and hanging out with the kids and their spouse, consistently stays late at work. Day after day, week after week, month after month. It could be someone who is unwilling to help with the stuff around the house, doing dishes and laundry and cleaning the floors. Lord have mercy, the floors in our house get dirty like 6 times a day. It could be the woman refusing to have regular date nights because children priorities. You can think of so many of these. It could be a guy who plays video games when the kids go to bed rather than sitting with their spouse and having a discussion. You can think of any possible way. I don't have to discern yours. If you're sitting next to your spouse or the person you're dating, you know them. You know exactly the patterns and behaviors I'm talking about. Rather than having important discussions and dealing with conflict, we remain closed off because we tried so many times and we build up resentment. Maybe we failed to develop a good rhythm for sex, and that's become a constant thing that gets talked about and never resolved. There are so many things that can become long-term pitfalls in your marriage. I don't want anything that I say today to be considered a justification for either person in your relationship to give up on the other. I want you to know something. According to the scriptures, there's practically nothing that your spouse could or should do to you that has you give up on them in Christ. But I want you to know, it happens way too often. It happens way too often that in whatever shape or form it is, somebody is not pursuing the other, and this can happen in different degrees, in different persons, in different times, in different seasons. And then finally, when the time is right for you, selfishly, you open the door, and the person that you were hoping to see on the other side isn't there anymore. I don't necessarily mean that your spouse actually left the house, though. Some of you have probably experienced stuff like that. But it could be, I'm finally ready to have that discussion that we've been talking about forever. And the other one's like, I'm not ready anymore. I've tried too many times. I'm not open. I'm not willing to be hurt again. I know it's not going to change. We can be emotionally gone, physically gone, spiritually gone, or literally just not present at all. It's entirely possible that some of you have experienced those traumatic events. And I need to skip some of this. Let me just say this. If you've been in the position where you finally got up to open the door, and found the other person in whatever way gone or incapable of pursuing the intimacy that you were finally ready for, I want you to know that I'm sorry. Because those moments are awful. And I know that many of you have experienced them in some way, shape, or form. Maybe you currently feel like that in your marriage, where you're opening the door and the other person's standing there, but they're not open and available in the ways that you desperately want to know and be known. If you're there today, or you feel like you're heading in that direction, I want you to know there's hope. Real, tangible hope. That the direction that your marriage is heading or has headed is not God's will for you. And today, maybe he's willing to provide some breakthrough. So if you've been there, it sucks. But I want you to know, on the other side of some pain, there is amazing hope. Unfortunately, we might have to deal with some pain. She does. I opened the door, and he was gone. Verse 7, the night watchmen found me as they made their rounds. They beat me and bruised me and stripped off my veil, those watchmen on the walls. What on earth is happening here? What's up with the new characters? What's up with the dramatic twist of events? By the way, what's up with the veil? Didn't we already talk about the veil? Last go around, the marriage veil, the thing that was supposed to be the thinly, separating thing that was meant to entice you for more. What does the veil do after the wedding ceremony? It comes off. What's it doing back on? Like the rest of the passage, I don't think we interpret this just in the moment. I think we interpret this allegorically. Events and dreams aren't usually all that they seem, right? There's some additional layers. There's some psychology to peel apart. My take on the watchman that she encounters and the beating she receives is this is supposed to represent the moments in our lives that expose parts of us that we wanted to keep under wraps at all costs. Bad choices, bad habits, sketchy relationships. And when we finally see that our destructive habits have so damaged the people that we care about, the circumstances of life forcibly rip off the veil, and it sucks. It hurts. It leaves bruises. It leaves us, even if we're the ones partially responsible, asking like, why? When we get serious about pursuing intimacy and tending the garden of our relationships again, you don't return to a pristine, untouched garden. If you've let it go amok, it's going to be full of bad weeds. And if you've ever tried, I used to go to Bill Frill's house at like the end of the gardening season, and because he'd bring us buckets of cucumbers, but eventually he'd get tired of going in there. Because if you've been to Bill Frill's house, you remember the weeds are like this tall. Like he would disappear in there and like be gone. You couldn't see him. And I was afraid. I didn't want to go in there. And he'd say, you got to go in there and get your cucumbers. I'm not going in anymore. If you leave the garden to nature, bad things will happen. And you know what happens? There's so many weeds that you can't tell what's a weed and what's the plant you want to protect anymore. And even if you can decipher them, the weeds, when you try to pull them out, the roots are entangled with the good stuff. So I want you to know, if intimacy is something in your marriage that has been left to its own device for a period of time for whatever reason, you don't come back as if it's like, okay, fresh start today, it's going to be different. It's going to take some work. You're going to have to earn your green thumb again. But you can, with God's help. It's a tough path to reclaim intimacy, and sometimes you got to walk straight through the beatings and the stripping moments. And they constantly feel like low blows. But your commitment to your spouse, which we found earlier in Song chapter 4, you're beautiful, beautiful in every way, my darling. You remember that? He says that to start, lists off this whole thing, and in the end says, no matter what, you're beautiful in every way. That commitment of your spouse to say that to you is offered with also the commitment on your end to take off the veil and be vulnerable and know and be known. During young love, the veil symbolizes the enticing excitement of the unknown. But in mature love, it's nothing but frustration. You want to know and be known emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, and physically. And when that's shut off at whatever level, mature love has a hard time producing fruit. The affirmation of beauty in every way means that you're willing to constantly uncover the parts of your life that you don't like. Warts, rolls, immaturities, how your body changes, how your mind changes, how you emotionally and mentally change through seasons of life, constantly offering all of yourself to all you know of your spouse. That's the commitment to being called beautiful and beautiful in every way. I'll take a posture of constantly ripping off the veil myself, no matter how hard and no matter how scary. But you know what happens? Sin enters into the equation. It makes us feel inadequate, insecure, scared. It convinces us that we're not telling our spouse things that we should for their own good, when it's really out of selfish protection and fear on our own part. You say things like, if I told them, it would hurt them. It's better they don't know. It's not the right time to bring this up. And your choice to recoil from true intimacy, of knowing and being fully known, is not righteous in any way. The veil is not meant to go back on in marriage. You're putting something back on that Christ died to tear off. Intimacy with your spouse, man and woman becoming one as God originally intended. When we build walls between what is supposed to be one, there is one word for that. It is called sin. And we need to repent and turn to Christ and ask for his help to tear down the walls. It's sad. And I speak from experience. Like Adam and Eve in the garden, when we sin, we cover ourselves, don't we? Out of fear. We don't want the other person to know all that's going on. It's painful. It's scary. How are they going to react? Are they going to be able to handle it? Am I going to be able to handle it? We go through all of these things. But that's not God's intention for your marriage. No matter how you try to justify it, covering up and putting on the veil at whatever level of intimacy that's being messed up is not God's plan. Trust and intimacy shatters when we realize the other people in our lives have not brought to the table the promised transparency of when we said yes to one another forever, in sickness and in health, in the good and the bad. If we refuse to talk about our problems, we are introducing sin obstacles into our relationships, where God has actually designed for us to grow in knowledge and favor with one another and with him through the process. So what happens? Here we go. What happens if we live our lives veiled from our spouses in the most important ways? What happens is eventually they stop knocking. Eventually they stop jiggling the handle. Eventually they stop taking interest. And then when you finally want the intimacy, you have the jarring experience of, he finally left. Or experiencing, she has a secret string of text messages. Or he's been hiding a drinking problem. You name it. And those moments beat us up. And they forcibly rip off the veil. They leave us wreathing, hurt, vulnerable, exposed, and scared. And it's never entirely the other person's fault. How are we going to respond in those moments? Because they suck. God has a pattern and a plan for how we should respond. In this moment, the woman calls for help, calls for aid. She says, make this promise, chapter 5, verse 8, O women of Jerusalem, if you find my lover, tell him I'm weak with love. Imagine waking up to the horrifying reality of a spouse that's left. And imagine the chaos that consumes your mind. Imagine how your heart is racing and you can't even function or put like thoughts together in your mind, let alone words to express your pain. What's the most natural thing in the world in those moments where we're reeling? It's to reach out to people who are close to us, friends and family. I need help. I'm sorry. If you see him or her, can you tell him I'm sorry? I never meant for it to get this bad. I want to do, I still love her. Will you tell him? And this doesn't have to be a full-blown marital separation. This happens all the time with empty nesters. The kids are gone, they wake up one day and they realize, I don't love you, I love our kids. Uh-oh. I'm sorry. We should have dated more when the kids were little. I should have helped more around the house. I shouldn't have spent all that time at the office. If you see my spouse, the one that I fell in love with 20 years ago, will you tell him I'm sorry? The ruptures come in all shapes and sizes. So this woman reaches out to her friends, and she continues, verse 9, or they respond to her reaching out. Why is your lover better than all others, O woman of rare beauty? What makes your lover so special that we should promise to tell them this? You know what they're saying? Why should we help you? We watched you ignore your spouse for your career for years. We counseled them through the pain. We watched as you said yes to your kids and not your spouse. We listened as you talked about all the ways that you weren't engaged in your life and never even tried to reach out or offer a branch of reconciliation. We watched as your relationship was ripped apart. Why would we want to put it back together? If you loved him so much, why'd you let him leave? That's the horrible response of the friends. And I don't think this passage is supposed to actually have us answer that question, because it's not helpful to dwell on all the ways that we're guilty of our past mistakes. Instead, the questions of verse 9 are supposed to help us discover our intentions for restoring our relationships and our intimacy. They're saying, hey, why would we put you back together if you're going to do the same thing again? Like, do you actually love him, or do you love the stability he provides? Do you actually love her, or do you not know how to pay your own bills? If we get back together, are you guys actually going to pursue each other and balance each other out? Because we don't want to see you guys go through more metaphorical strippings and beatdowns. So why should we help you? Why should we even care? Do you even love him anymore? What's the point of seeking out and restoring what's been lost and muddled and is full of weeds? Here's her response. Learn from it. Why do I want him to know? Because my lover is dark and dazzling, better than 10,000 others when I take the moment to think about it. His head is finest gold, his wavy hair is as black as a raven, his eyes sparkle like doves beside springs of water. They're set like jewels washed in milk. His cheeks are like gardens of spices giving off fragrance. His lips are like lilies perfumed with myrrh. His arms are like rounded bars of gold. His body is like bright ivory glowing. His legs are like marble pillars set in sockets of finest gold. His posture is stately like the noble cedars of Lebanon. His mouth is sweetness itself. He's desirable in every way. A woman of Jerusalem, here's the answer why I want you to tell him that I still love him. Because he is my lover and my friend. Why do I want him back? Because I realize why I loved him to begin with. I realize that he's my best friend. My best chance at all that God wants for me. He's the one I originally changed everything about my life for. He's my best shot at happiness, not getting instead just totally subsumed by my own selfishness. I want him back because God made us one. And I want to be one as he is one. It's like the modern, who's the group that sings this? Counting Crows? Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone. You know how the ladies of Jerusalem respond to her declaration of love and her willingness to pursue him for all the right reasons rather than the wrong reasons? They giddy up. Chapter 6, verse 1. Where is your lover gone, O woman of rare beauty? Which way did he turn so we can help? I want you to know something. If you're willing to admit your faults and your failures and the ways you've screwed up and the way that you want to restore your marriage, people are ready and willing to help. God will meet you. This church will meet you. I will meet you. Your family will meet you. If you bring the right intentions to the table, there is no limit to what God can't restore. So today, if you're in it for all the right reasons, there are a lot of resources. But no matter what, your garden's going to need some tender love and care. And you're going to need some training for how to produce the fruit that God desires you to have. But there's so much hope as long as you're willing to take off the veil voluntarily, or at least if it's forced off, deal with the craziness that ensues. We don't know what caused the problem. That's what's left up in the air for us. Why he stops jiggling the handle, what they'd really want metaphorically in your relationship. I don't know personally what's caused all the rifts in your relationships. But I do know how we can respond because the text gives us a model. We don't know what caused chapter 5, verses 2 through 6, but in the next section, we get what I call a relational fix-a-flat. Okay? Here is how we are going to go about earning our green thumb, and I got to move with haste. Transparency. If you've been veiled, take it off. Exterior help. If you try to do it alone, it's going to be a hard road, and there are so many people who are willing to help. And then it's going to take real pursuit and effort, a commitment to rediscover why you fell in love to begin with. Once she gives the young women the necessary information as to why she wants to find her spouse again and pursue breakthrough in their intimacy, we actually find him. Chapter 6, my lover has gone down to his garden, to his spice bed, to browse among the gardens and gather the lilies. Listen to this line, this commitment. I am my lover's, and my lover is mine. The problem that led to where they're at in their relationship does not define their current commitment or their future hope. I am my lover's, and my lover is mine. He browses among my lilies. I have found him. Let me express renewed commitment to working this out. It's an affirmation of shared ownership and shared responsibility again. I'm ready to give everything again. Let's do it. Let's get tools and helps, and no matter the physical, financial, or emotional cost or the physical burden of this all, we're going to do it. Two have become one. I am yours and you are mine, and I'm not willing to forsake that heavenly reality, come hell or high water. So how is he going to respond? You know as well as I do that one side of the relationship doesn't fix the relationship. You have to have the pursuit and the effort, the willingness to actually try on both sides and confess. How is he going to respond? He responds as Christ calls us to respond. We've all had conversations that don't resolve the way we want, and that's because there's a lot of sin in the world. Sometimes we'll extend an olive branch and it just gets swatted away or taken away and then returned on us for a beating. You've been there. How are you going to respond today if your spouse takes off the veil and shares what could be scary, painful, or sometimes even just minor things? Lord, have mercy if everybody's got a nuke behind the veil today. But like any way that you've just not given all of yourself to your spouse for fear or insecurity, if you take off the veil today, or you have the veil taken off in front of you, how are you going to respond? Let me tell you how sometimes people respond. Sometimes people say, get out. Or I'm out. How do you think Jesus would have us deal with these situations? Do you know that he actually tells you? Matthew chapter 19, verse 8. It's this discussion about divorce. Jesus replies to the questions, Moses permitted divorce only as a concession to your hard hearts. It was not what God originally intended. Today, as gardeners, what if we commit to till up our hard hearts to produce fruit in intimacy again, to restore God's original intention in Christ rather than letting sin win the day. Who wants to have sin be the thing that defines our marriage forever? You've got two choices when the veil comes off in your intimate relationships. One, you can join in the beating of the watchman. Rip off the veil and beat the other person to a pulp. Be their own worst enemy and thing that they're scared of. Or two, like Christ, you could lean in and recommit and make a renewed vow to rediscover God's intention for your marriage. What do you think the young man's going to choose? Chapter 6, verse 4. Here's how he responds to her saying, I'm all in again and I'm sorry. He says, you're beautiful, my darling. Same as the beginning of chapter 4, before they were even married. First words out of his mouth, you're beautiful, my darling. Like a lovely city. You're as beautiful as Jerusalem, as majestic as the army with billowing banners. Turn your eyes from me, for they overpower me. Remember before? Like, your gaze holds me captive and has power over my heart. Verbatim. Your hair falls in waves like flocks of goats winding down the slopes of Gilead. He loves his goat illustrations. Your teeth, just like chapter 4, are white as sheep that are fleshly washed. You've got all your teeth through thick and thin. We've made it through a lot, and you still have your teeth in your hair. Your cheeks are rosy like pomegranates behind your veil. Even though the mention of the veil is still there, listen to how it continues. Even among 60 queens, 80 concubines, and countless young women, I would still choose my dove, my perfect one, the favorite of her mother, dearly loved by the one she has bore. The young woman, see her and praise her. Even queens and royal concubines sing her praises. What's he saying in modern language? Girl, you still grind my gears after all these years. Things have changed, bodies have changed, circumstances have changed. My desire to fully know you and be fully known by you hasn't. And I still choose you every time. He continues in chapter 7, listen closely to this old and new. How beautiful are your sandaled feet, O queenly maiden. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, a work of skilled craftsmanship. Your navel is perfectly formed. Everybody loves to have their belly button talked about. Like a goblet filled with mixed wine. Between your thighs are mounds of wheat bordered with lilies. Your breasts are like twin fawns of a gazelle. Your neck is like as beautiful as an ivory tower. Your eyes are like sparkling pools. Your nose is as fine as the Tower of Lebanon. I mean, who wants to hear that? Overlooking Damascus. Your head is as majestic as Mount Carmel. The sheen of your hair radiates royalty. The king is held captive by its tresses. How beautiful you are. How pleasing, my love, and full of delights. You are slender like a palm tree. Your breasts are like clusters of fruit. Listen to this. I said, I will climb the palm tree and take hold of its fruits. May your breasts be like grape clusters and the fragrance of your breath like apples. He expresses his recommitment fairly graphically, saying, I'm going to grab our marriage by the coconuts, okay? I'm in it. She says it a little bit more stately. Well, take that back. Chapter 8, verse 5. I aroused you under the apple tree where your mother gave you birth, where in pain she delivered you, not so stately in that moment. By the way, that means we've gone through some full circle of pain and hurt and confusion. Here's my commitment. Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal over your arm. For love is as strong as death, its jealousy as enduring as the grave. Love flashes like fire, the brightest kind of flame. Many waters cannot quench love, nor can rivers drown it. If a man tries to buy love with all of his wealth, his offer would be utterly scorned. I think that final line should give us pause as we recommit today to pursuing intimacy in our closest relationships. If you're not actually willing to work at it, if you just want the fruit without the gardening routine, take it elsewhere. It's only going to result in more pain and more hurt and more scorn. But if you are willing to commit, invest, and work at it, learn some new skills, it's amazing what might be produced. I need to conclude with this. Chapter 7, verses 9 through 13. May your kisses be as exciting as the best wine. Yes, wine that goes down smoothly for my lover, flowing gently over lips and teeth. I am my lover's, and he claims me as his own. Come, my love, let us go into the fields and spend the night among the wildflowers. Let us get up early and go into the vineyards to see the grapevines have budded, if the blossoms have opened, if the pomegranates have bloomed. There I will give you my love. There the mandrakes give off their fragrance, and the finest fruits are at our door. New delights, as well as old, which I have saved for you, my lover. This week, how about you commit, at whatever level this connects to your relationship, to try to discover the old reasons you fell in love to begin with, and the new reasons that life has provided to continue to love and pursue. Literally, by the way, the Hebrew for the word mandrake means love plant. And mandrakes in ancient civilization were considered to be hallucinogenic and aphrodisiacs. She's literally saying, let's explore each other like we did in the beginning. Whatever that looks like, I don't know for you. And may the love that that produces give off a great fragrance. If you're willing today to pursue your spouse like you did when you were first married, God's promise with his help is you will discover old fruits that you loved and new ones you're yet to imagine through a lifelong of a green thumb pursuing intimacy. And he really wants to help you with this. Like, people think that sex isn't something that God's interested in. Then why did he write this passage? Through the Spirit's inspiration. He's not embarrassed by it. The fact that you are, that's called sin. Today, God's calling you to take off the veil for however it's affecting your intimacy. Have the tough conversations that are necessary. Own your junk and reaffirm your commitment. And that doesn't mean that tomorrow you'll be harvesting all the fruit that you want, okay? You might have a lot of weeds. I'm young, I got a lot of weeds. But if we're committed to pulling them and tilling the soil and adding in fertilizer, God will help us discover new delights as well as old. Let me just put it in Jordan Peterson's words. I don't know if you've read him. He's a contemporary public intellectual. He says this: it's worthwhile to find the dragon in its lair instead of waiting for it to come out and eat you. The things that you're keeping psychologically hidden, you can't contain them. And they're eating you from the inside. And the scriptures tell us one day, they're going to be the reason that you don't have the intimacy that you crave in life. And then when you finally try to own it, it's going to give you a beating. Commit to slaying the dragon together with God's help. Confess your faults, your unmet needs, the desires that you've kept quiet. Ask for forgiveness and ask for God's help to help you forgive your spouse. And see if your spouse doesn't say, I still choose you. My lover, my darling, and my friend. I am yours through thick and thin, and you are mine